Hello, lightning biologists. Hey, if you're struggling with Mendelian genetics and solving probability, or the quiz that you took didn't go so well, here is an opportunity for reassessment. And this video is made just to walk you through the reassessment a little bit. You can use this, watch it before you take the reassessment. You could watch it while you're taking the reassessment to kind of support you along the way. So hopefully you can better understand how we solve for probability when using genetics. So the reassessment that I have sent you will open, make a copy for you, and then you will need to share that with me. But it's going to look exactly like this reassessment here. So it says Mendelian genetics, solving for probability. Then there's this box right here. You can actually click on that box and then start typing in, just like your vocabulary or things that you've done. And so you're going to type in, I'm going to write because I have it in my writing mode right now. But you would type in your name. So Ms. Sechrist. Don't type in my name, type in your name. And then it's going to have this example question, and yours is going to be filled in. But I want to walk you through how that got filled in to maybe be able to support you when you're doing your 2 questions. So please use this example as your guide to how I expect you to answer the following. And there's not 3, there's actually 2 questions. Notice question 3 is different. Read careful. That question has been omitted. All right, so in pea plants, so we're talking about pea plants, just like Gregor Mendel grew. There are spherical seeds, which are dominant to dented seeds. And so a spherical seed, a sphere is a circle, okay? So this is a sphere, it's a ball, basically. Okay? A dented is going to have little dents in it. Kind of like, have you ever seen a dent in a car? Hopefully you've never created one, but a dented is going to have these little dents. So those are the 2 shapes that you can get your pea seed in. So it tells us that, so we're going to deal with seed shape. That's our trait that we're looking at. It tells us that spherical seeds are dominant to dented seeds. And so what we're going to do here is I'm going to go down to my key and I'm going to fill in the key. So what is the dominant phenotype? The dominant phenotype is spherical. And the genotype that would go with that is going to be big S, or big S, little s, because those are both dominant genotypes. The recessive then is dented. That's the phenotype, physically what I see. And its genotype always has to be a homozygous recessive. That's the only way you can get the recessive phenotype. Okay, as I continue in the question now, it's going to tell me what are the parents that we're crossing to get the offspring. And so the next thing, and I'll just change colors to make it easier, in a genetic cross, the 2 plants that are heterozygous for seed shape trait. All right, so heterozygous, you have to know what that word means. You're going to have to know, go back to your vocab if you need to. You have to know what heterozygous is. Hetero is not the same, as opposed to homo would be the same. So heterozygous means that the 2 alleles are not the same. So they would have one big one and one little one, because those are not the same. So both parents are heterozygous. And so down here, we're going to put in where it says cross, this is what the parent's phenotype. So we're going to put in a heterozygous, and is crossed with a heterozygous. So that's telling us what the parent genotypes are. All right, now we're going to go down and now we're going to use that information to determine, well, what kind of offspring could they have? Are they going to have spherical seed offspring? Are they going to have dented seed offspring? When we do a Punnett square, we can actually predict what those offspring will be. And so when we take the Punnett square, we'll take one parent's genotype and we'll say, okay, this parent could give the big S to their offspring, because remember, each parent will only give one allele of each trait to their offspring. You got one allele of each of your traits from your biological mom and one allele of each trait from your biological dad. And so this parent could give the big S or it could give the little s. This parent could give the big S or it could also give the little s. And so now you're just going to use the Punnett square to distribute the different possibilities. And so if this parent would give the big S and this parent would also give the big S, you would have a homozygous dominant offspring. If this parent would give its big S, so we're just filling over and bringing down. So now I bring this little s down. We have a heterozygous because they're not the same. This big S we bring down, and this little s we bring over. Another heterozygous. And this last square is going to be little s coming over and little s coming down. And so the last square is going to be homozygous recessive. All right, so now I'm asking you a couple questions. So you really have everything figured out. You just need to now go back to the question and really say, okay, what is she asking me to determine? What is she asking me to predict, or the probability? And if you go back up to the question, it says, what fraction of the offspring should have spherical seeds? Well, spherical seeds is going to be big S, or big S, little s. So it's a dominant trait. So I just go down to my Punnett square, and I'm going to circle everything that has spherical seeds. So this heterozygous will, this homozygous dominant will, and this heterozygous will. This homozygous recessive will not. It will have dented. And so the probability, or the fraction, is how many of those four will have spherical seeds. So I literally just count 1, 2, 3, and my answer is 3/4 of the offspring will have spherical seeds. Likewise, I go back to the next question that it's asking. What is the probability? So you guys, probability equals fraction. So if you see probability or you see fraction, it's the same thing. It's how many of those four have that particular trait. And so when I go down here and I look, I am going to count what is the probability that the offspring will be hybrid. Well, what's a hybrid? A hybrid is the same thing as a heterozygous. Heterozygous equals hybrid. And so I'm going to go count, well, how many of these four are hybrid? I'll put a line under it. There's 1, there's 2, that's homozygous dominant, that's homozygous recessive. So my answer will be 2 of 4. You can simplify. Whoops. You can simplify it if you want. So 2/4 does equal 1/2, but you do not have to simplify it. I would be totally fine with 2/4 in that situation. Okay, let's take a real quick look at the next two questions that you are going to actually answer on your own, but you can always reference back to this because they're set up pretty much the same. So the first question is going to talk about in pea plants again. But in pea plants, and we'll go through and highlight a few of these things. In pea plants, the yellow pod, so here's the yellow pod, and they're dominant, okay, to the green pod, and green pod is recessive. So the first thing I would encourage you to do is go ahead and transfer what is the dominant phenotype and what would its genotypes be, and then what is the recessive phenotype, That's what you physically see, so it's going to be yellow or green. And then what are the genotypes? And you guys, the 3 genotype options can either be big Y, could be big Y with a little y, or it could be little y, little y. So those are your 3 genotype options to fill in. The next thing it asks you to do then is it gives you the cross. So in a genetic cross, 2 plants, so you're crossing 2 plants that are heterozygous. So again, we're doing heterozygous. So you got to remember, you just go back to my question before, what is heterozygous? And so you're going to go put in the heterozygous with the heterozygous. So you put the heterozygous here, crossed with a heterozygous. Then you're going to go ahead and filter in each parent into the Punnett Square, and you will be left with the offspring. Once you have the offspring, then you go back to my question. The first question is, what fraction of the offspring should have yellow pods? So you'll just go in here and you'll say, okay, how many of the 4 have yellow pods? And you're going to type that number in right there. And so maybe it's 1/4, maybe it's 2/4, maybe it's 3/4, maybe it's all 4/4. And then the second question is asking you, it's different from the example question. It is asking you, what is the probability that the offspring will be homozygous recessive? So I'm testing to know, do you know what homozygous recessive is? Do you know which genotype is homozygous recessive? You're going to look in the Punnett Square, how many of them, count the number, and then you'll type that in right in front of that 4. So again, it could be 0/4, it could be 1/4, 2/4, or 3/4. The last question I'm having you do is a human trait question. It says, in humans, tongue rolling is dominant to non-rolling. So I don't know if you've ever tested yourself, but tongue rolling is this. See how I can roll my tongue? That means that I have at least one dominant allele for that trait. A person who cannot roll their tongue, when they try to do that, their tongue will just remain flat, kind of like, And so that would mean that that person is homozygous recessive. So in this question, in humans, tongue rolling is dominant to non-rolling. Non-rolling is not able to roll. So we're going to have a man. Okay, so I'm going to draw a man right here. We'll just call him man. All right. He can roll his tongue. So he can roll. So he is tongue rolling, which then that tells you that he has the dominant trait. However, you don't know his genotype. And so how you figure out his genotype is you look at his parents. So we don't know his dad, but we know his mom. Happy little lady. His mom could not. So she is non-rolling. So what you're going to want to do here is figure out her genotype. What is her genotype if she's non-rolling? Then you'll know if this man is a big R, or if he's a big R, little r. The mom is going to help you determine which one this is. Okay? So that's why you need her genotype, that the mom is non-rolling. He is going to marry a woman who is also non-rolling, so her genotype will be just like his mom's. And then you're going to go ahead and figure it out. What's the probability of their child not being able to roll? And then the second question is a little tricky. It's what's the probability of all 3? So you take number 1 times number 2 times number 3. So you got to do a little bit of math. So the probability of 1 times the probability of a second child times the probability of the third. So basically you're going to take whatever the answer is to the third power. So n to the third power. So I'll let that one be kind of the tricky one for you, but I hope this helps. Good